with Temple Aliyah and Rabbis Vogel and Golko, as well as Rabbi Cameras from Shomrei Torah. And as you just heard, this session will be recorded, so you'll be able to hear it later, as well as other people who might be watching other things on the TV right now will get a chance to watch it later as well. I'm really honored to be here and introduce and moderate this second installment of this important program. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can chat them to me directly and I'm happy to ask them, or use the raise your hand function that you can find at the bottom of your screen. But there will be time tonight for people to ask questions of our speaker. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Mr. Bassem Eid is a Jerusalem-based political analyst, human rights pioneer, and expert commentator on Arab and Palestinian and Israeli affairs. He was born in Jordan-occupied the Old City of East Jerusalem, where he was born became a refugee camp known as Shuafat, where he spent the first 33 years of his life. He rose to prominence during the First Intifada, the Palestinian uprising, and was a senior field researcher for the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the occupied territories called B'Tselem. And in 1996, he founded the Jerusalem-based Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Groups. And in 2016, he assumed the role of chairman of the Center for Near East Policy Research. He has traveled far and wide speaking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I will put his website in the chat box. So if you would like to read more about him and the amazing and important work he does, you'll be able to click on that and read it for yourself. Tonight, Bassem will be talking to us about the impact of the BDS, the Boycott, Divestiture, and Sanctions movement on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we are so honored to have you again here today, Mr. Eid.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for the introduction. In my opinion, I think that we are going to touch a very, very important and a very sensitive topic, which is the BDS and its impact on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let me first of all bring the history of the BDS in front of the audience here, and to tell them how the idea of the BDS came out. In 2002, which is, let's say, 2 years after the beginning of the Second Intifada, the UN decided to make an international conference in Durban in South Africa. Many NGOs, Palestinians, Israelis, and from the international community, some countries also joined that conference in Durban. And the whole idea of boycotting Israel almost found it during that conference in 2002 in Durban in South Africa. And since that time, the BDS movement started organizing itself, building its agenda and its aims and goals with the support, of course, of the international community and mainly from European countries. And we just start feeling the activities of the BDS, let me say, probably 5 years after and immediately after the Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in 2005. So this is the whole idea, how the BDS born and how the BDS movement came out to this world. Now, on the other side, I just heard recently that the conference Durban 2 is going to take place in December, which means in 2 months. And the Israeli ambassador to the UN right now, Gilad Erdan, trying to meet with all representatives of the international community in the UN to impose pressure on them not to join the second Durban conference in December. Till now, he succeeded to convince 36 countries that they are going to boycott the Durban second conference in December. I hope that his efforts will bring more and more countries to boycott such kind of conference, because in my opinion, the idea of the BDS will never ever create any kind of peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think that the BDS agenda right now is how to destroy Israel rather than how to bring peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It is very clear what the BDS is doing and what is the BDS aim is right now. Friends, since the creation of the BDS until today, I didn't see that the BDS succeed to provide any kind of help to the Palestinians. Look how many Palestinian workers almost lost their jobs as a result of the activities of the BDS. But those thousands of Palestinians workers who lost their jobs, they never ever benefited on anything from the BDS. I didn't see that the BDS tried to find jobs for them. I didn't see that the BDS trying to help them financially in terms to survive and to secure the future of their children. I didn't see it at all. On the other side, the BDS is functioning only in Europe and in the United States. In the United States, mainly, unfortunately, on the campuses of the United States. We, in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, we don't have even one member of the BDS. And you can see today that Israel is the only country which is providing the medicine, the water, the electricity, the oil to the Gaza Strip. I didn't see any movement in Gaza Strip right now calling for a boycott against Israel or not to accept any kind of supplies from the Israelis. So people knows if Israel is not going to supply, people are going to be hungry and thirsty in the Gaza Strip. On the other side, the BDS knows very well that if their members will appear in a Palestinian refugee camp one day and calling the Palestinian workers to boycott Israel, people are going to throw shoes on them. By boycotting Israel, what is the alternative here? What trying to find out any kind of alternative after boycotting Israel. If we will boycott Israel, who is going to supply for us? Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia? No one of them is scared right now about the Palestinians. This is one of the major important issues that we should have to bring out to the mainly to the United States people and to the students on the campuses. Friends, I used to say all the time that the economic prosperity is probably the way to pave, is probably the only way which to pave the road towards a future peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Now, while we are calling for economic prosperity, those thugs and gangsters are calling to boycott Israel. By boycotting Israel, we, the Palestinians, losing our economy, because 100% of the Palestinian economy laid on Israel, coming from Israel. Friends, these days, we have around 150,000 Palestinian workers who are crossing early morning the West Bank to inside Israel to work and to come back. Beside that number of the 150,000, we have another 15,000 Palestinian workers who are working in the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. We, the Palestinians who are building the houses of the settlers, not the Turkish, not the Filipinos, not the Thai. And we are very proud to say it because we want to survive and we want to secure the future of our children. That's the most important thing. Now, I was in South Africa for 4 times, and I participated in conferences in South Africa. I appeared in several universities over there, and I saw those BDS members. Those people are just spreading lies towards Israel. Those people has no idea what is going on in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. Those people want just to destroy the future of the Palestinians and the Israelis. I met with several students in different universities in South Africa. Those students told me very important thing, that one time they tried to arrange a trip to Israel. 14 students arranged a trip to Israel. They want to go to Israel and to see what's really going on over there. What's happened after they decided to go to Israel? The BDS movement approached them. They tried to convince them not to make that trip to Israel. But when those students refused, you know what the BDS did? The BDS suggested to each student $4,000 to avoid such kind of trip to Israel. You know, $4,000 in South Africa, you can live in that amount for 1 year. For 1 year, it's considered as a huge amount of money. And the question is, from where the BDS bringing such a huge amount of money? When we talk about 14 students with $4,000, this is something like $52,000. That's a huge amount of money. But I am very proud to say that those students rejected the offer and they arrived to Israel, and I met them in Jerusalem. I took them on a tour to Ramallah to see how life is so normal in the West Bank. So that's exactly how the BDS is functioning. I used to say all the time, the money that Europe is giving to the BDS, if that money will go direct to the Palestinians, 8 jobs to the Palestinians, to factories for the Palestinians, imagine which economic prosperity that amount of money can bring to the Palestinians. But unfortunately, looks like to me, it's moving backward to its own history, which the history is the anti-Semitism. I think that anti-Semitism born in Europe rather than in the Arab country. And unfortunately, Europe these days became a part of the conflict rather than they are a part of the solution. This is really one of the major big problems to the Palestinians. Now, on the other side, what Israel as a country is trying to do against the BDS. Israel as a state, I didn't see that they are doing that much against the BDS movement in Europe and in the US. I think that the organizations, the Jewish organizations in the United States are doing much more than the state of Israel in fighting the BDS movement. And this is what I told many Israeli officials when I am invited to the Knesset in Jerusalem. I used to say that Israel should have to spend more money and more advocacy in terms to fight the BDS in Europe and in the United States. I think that those people are causing a huge damage to the Israelis and to the Palestinians, and those people are trying to make the situation more and more complicated between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I remember when I was in South Africa, I gave one of an interviews to one of the biggest newspapers over there. And of course, I talk about the BDS and how the BDS causing damage to the Palestinian economy. The journalist who interviewed me contacted one of the BDS member to get his reaction on what I said. You know what was the reaction of the BDS member on what I said? He said to the journalist that Mr. Eid is right. We are aware about the difficulties that the Palestinian workers are facing right now. But in the meantime, the BDS member continued that it's going to be a short-term suffer, long-term benefit. That's really so funny statement. You know who told the Palestinians a such statement in 1948 after the war in 48? Are escaping to the Arab countries. The Arab leaders in that time stood up by saying to the Palestinians that it's going to be a short-term benefit, short-term suffer, long-term benefit. And look, since 48 until today, over than 73 years, we didn't see any kind of benefit in our life like that. So the BDS should have to go back to the history to 1948 and to listen what the Arab leaders told the Palestinians. And no short benefit, no short suffer. It is a long-term suffer, by the way, without any kind of benefits right now. Friends, I must have to tell you that recently you heard about Ben and Jerry's ice cream and how Ben and Jerry's decided to boycott Israel and mainly the settlements. I want to tell you that I have a very good friend in New York who is a lawyer. And I met with him on the 5th of October, just something like 10 days ago. And I said, David, I am as a Palestinian, I am as a person who is care about his own people, I want to sue Ben and Jerry's in the American court here in New York. I want you to arrange the charges. I have answers for all those charges, and I want really to see the American judiciary involved in such kind of activities of the BDS. The lawyer right now is working on the charges. I believe that on the first week of November, he will file all the papers to the court, and I want to see which results we are going to get out of that case. I think that the American judiciary should have to be aware about the damage that the BDS movement is causing to the Palestinian workers and to their children. You know why I said their children? Because as you know, according to the Israeli law, any Palestinian worker will have his own medical insurance and his children medical insurance. So while you are losing your job, immediately your children losing their medical insurance. And that's the tragedy. I think that the American people should have to be aware about such kind of facts, that the BDS is not causing only damage to our workers, but they also causing a huge damage to our workers' children losing their medical insurance. What a crime those children already committed to lose their own medical insurance. I think that there are so many facts that we can bring them to the court and to see how the court decision is going to be. So I hope that I am personally trying to do all my best in terms to impose a big war on such kind of organization called the BDS, because I am feeling and I am aware about the damage that those people are causing to my people in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. On the other side, the big question mark should have to be, whom authorized the BDS to speak on behalf of the Palestinians? I didn't see any Palestinian official or any Palestinian leader authorized the BDS to speak on behalf of us. So I think that this is also a very big question. Whom authorized the BDS to speak on behalf of the Palestinian people? And to highlight it, and I will demand a kind of an answer from the court itself, whom authorized the BDS to speak on behalf of us. So probably I will stop right now, and we have another half an hour. So please your questions, I will be more happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eid. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will either call on you or happy to read them for you if you don't want to. We do have one question from Rachel. So the question is, why do you think Israel has allowed American Jewry to do more about the BDS movement? Would quantitative data of the effects help catalyze more Israeli efforts?
I think that Israel should have to create more and campaigns. I think that Israel should have to bring more and more Arab and Palestinian speakers to the campuses in the US. Listen, there are so many Palestinians who would like to appear here and to tell the truth about our own daily life under the Israelis. I think that Israel has so many tools to fight against such kind of organization, which is unfortunately right now. I didn't see that Israel doing that much against that organization. And as I told you, I believe that there are so many Jewish organizations in the US who are doing much more against the BDS rather than the state of Israel. Look to me, I am every month coming here to the US, invited by several organizations here to come and to talk about the BDS, about the apartheid, about the coexistence between the Israelis and the Arabs. And those organizations looks like to me that they are much more strong towards the advocacy that they are doing here in the United States. And I think that their advocacy and their campaigns not only helping the state of Israel, not only helping the Jewish people, but it is also helping the Palestinians themselves. So I hope
Looks like we're having another technical glitch.
to impose a kind of influence here in the campuses. Listen, look to the Abraham's Accord. Look to the Abraham's Accord. Where is the BDS in the United Arab Emirates? Where is the BDS in the Kingdom of Bahrain? Where is the BDS in the Kingdom of Morocco? Why there is no BDS in the Arab countries? Because the Arab countries knows that these people has their own political agenda and they couldn't ever appear in any other country, Arab country. So this is why you are seeing them only in the States and in the European countries. But no one member is living under any other Arab country.
So I'm interested in your take as why do you think the Israeli government hasn't done more? You said it all is more or less coming from America and other places, but the Israeli government has not fought hard against the BDS movement. Why do you think the Israeli government hasn't taken that lead?
Looks like to me that Israel has much more important issues to deal with than to deal with the BDS. Now, when Israel signing, is such kind of a peace accord with the United Arab Emirates, with the Kingdom of Bahrain. Listen, United Arab Emirates is going in the coming year to invest in Israel over than $100 billion. So Israel said, listen, why I should have to go after in the United States and to deal with them? I am already fine. I know exactly how to bring Arabs to invest inside Israel, and Israel completely correct. I completely agree with Israel on that. I think that economically, Israel is going to be stronger and stronger after all of those Abraham's Accords. And in the meantime, I don't think that the BDS can do anything over here. And this is probably why Israel is laying much more on such organizations, in the US, that let these organizations do the job for us. And let those organizations make the job for us. And as a country, as a government, let us focus on something else, which is much more important. And I totally agree with the state of Israel on that aspect.
Another question that someone put in our chat was, it seems that the BDS movement is infiltrating many aspects of American life. For example, there are chapters of J Street U that are working to encourage the U.S. to cut off military assistance to Israel. How would you advise responding to this kind of activity on our college campuses and just in general in American life?
See, I am very aware about the J Street. I just today put a post on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram, calling people to sign a petition to condemn the activities of the J Street on the issue of the military aid to Israel. I remember also just probably a month ago or less, some Democratic representatives, members like Rashida Tlaib, like Ilan Umar, who asked, to avoid giving any money to the Iron Dome in Israel. And I wrote an article in that time, and I said that the Iron Dome never ever discriminate, which means that the Iron Dome is protecting not only Jewish, also Christians, also Muslims, also Israelis, also Arabs. And I think that the United States should have to continue funding and giving aid to the Iron Dome. In my opinion, the G Street also they have their own political agenda, and I am quite sure that any organization in the United States who is going to demand to avoiding any funding to Israel, they are going to fail on that. I think that Israel needs such kind of financial aid, and no doubt that financial aid, part of it is going to the Palestinians, because while Israel is building factories, while Israel is creating jobs, then more and more Palestinian workers will be allowed to work in Israel. And that's exactly our demand to the Israeli officials. Please try every month to increase the number of the working permits to the Palestinians. That's really very important. And in my opinion, the Israelis are very aware about it. And I think that the American administration is not that stupid administration to just fulfill any demand coming from here and there against Israel. I believe that the American administration will continue its financial support to the Israelis, because that support also benefited not only the Israelis, but also the Palestinians.
Thank you. I know Rabbi Cameras had a question or two.
So, yeah, I have a number of questions, but you speak with such passion on behalf of the Palestinians, and the question that I have is, where is the rest of the Palestinian leadership who understands the negative damages that BDS creates for their people? Where is their leadership speaking directly to the US, to Congress, coming out onto college campuses to try to sway the conversation here in America to stop BDS from happening?
Do
you feel you're a lone voice, or do you see there is support by other Palestinians in leadership?
there is a support from Palestinians. I couldn't talk about the leadership. You know, we are divided. We have the Palestinian people and we have the Palestinian leadership, which is both of them are living in different valleys. The leadership has no idea what's going on among the people, and the people already lost the trust in their own leadership. I totally agree with you that the Palestinian leadership should have to appear here in the US, mainly at the Congress, and to tell the congressmen how much the BDS is causing damage to their own people. But the problem is that the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian leadership right now are feeling so satisfied with what they have. When those European countries and the Congress decide for any that financial aid is going direct to the leaders rather than it is going directly to the Palestinians. And while these people filling their pockets with millions of dollars every month, I don't think that they are care really about the Palestinians. You look to the Arab leaders. Arab leaders always are not care about their own people. Arab leaders believes if my people will continue suffering, then I will be the leader forever. But if my people will be satisfied for 5 minutes, then revolutionary will take place against all of those dictatorship leaders in the Arab world. And the Palestinian Authority is among those Arab leaders. They are just want us to suffer. They don't want us to benefit. And this is why the Palestinian leadership is not appearing in such places like the Congress and to tell the congressmen about the suffer of the Palestinians as a result of the activities of the BDS.
Mark, another question, or do you have others? You're muted, Mark.
There aren't there. Go ahead and ask others. We don't have any more in the chat box right now.
Okay, well, there's one more from Charles.
Yeah.
Charles asked the question, given his limited knowledge with why is there so much violence, he's asking, from the Palestinians towards Israel and the Israelis? If the Palestinians are just seeking peace and economic prosperity?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You know, I am a person who used to say all the time, if the state of Israel will increase the Palestinian economy, that's probably will decrease the Palestinian violence. Let me be keen with you and tell you why I am moving in the West Bank and mainly in the refugee camps. Young Palestinians coming to me by saying, listen, I apply for a working permit 10 times and every time it was rejected. So I am jobless. I have nothing to do. I have a family. I have to help 4 or 5 brothers who are in the schools. So what I should have to do is just to try to take a knife and to go to try to stab an Israeli. Either I will be injured, or I will be killed, or I will be arrested. And after that, at least my family will have some income.
Looks like there's
Violence against the Israelis. So I think that the Israelis are very aware about that. And I think that the Israelis should have to give more and more working permits. You know, I must have to tell you one important thing. 4 days ago, one of the Hamas offices in Gaza declared that Israel is going to issue 5,000 working permits to Palestinian workers in Gaza. And anyone interested to get a working permit, he should have to go to register in a certain place in the Gaza Strip. You know, in one day, how many people went to that office and registered? 250,000, 250,000. Israel want to give 5,000 permits. 250,000 people registered for that. I think that there is a huge message beside that. And I think that Israel should have also to understand what is going on right now, especially in the Gaza Strip. I think that there are ministers today in the current government calling for more and more economic prosperity to the Gaza Strip. And the economic prosperity can be achieved via giving tens of thousands of working permits to the Palestinian workers in the Gaza Strip. Without giving such tens of thousands of working permits to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, I don't think that Israel can be quiet in the near future.
So this may be a better question right for the end, but we're getting close to the end, so I'll ask it anyway. Someone chatted to me, and I'm kind of rephrasing it, but if you were made king of the Middle East for a day.
If I what?
If you were the king of the Middle East, king of the world, if you could do anything, what would you do? How would you approach a solution to this BDS issue?
See, that's a very hard mission to be the king of the world. Really,
but congratulations, we made you one.
I don't wish to be that. Yeah, it is very heavy for me, and I don't think that I have enough time, you know, to deal with that. But in my opinion, I think that one of the major important issues here is how to organize more and more tours to Israel, how to bring more and more students from those campuses to bring them to Israel and to show them the facts on the ground, to take them to the hospitals and to see how Palestinians are leading departments over there, to take them and to see how the Palestinians are working over there. I think that the people don't have any idea what is going on over there, and is such tours to those students, in my opinion, that will make them a future ambassadors to the state of Israel. If these people will come and look into their eyes on what is going on, they will come here and start fighting with us against such horrible organization called the BDS.
So I've gotten two questions that are very similar that I'll ask, that kind of ask the same question from a different perspective. Yes. And that is, for everybody here, what can we do? What can we do to help the situation? What can we do to help spread the truth that you've been talking about? How can we make a difference?
That's exactly the most important message that I am trying to spread out here in the United States, and especially in the campuses. If you are really want to help the Palestinians and the Israelis, please impose pressure on your own representatives. Go to the Capitol Hill, meet with your representatives, encourage your representatives to improve the economy to the Palestinians. I am a person who believes only in economy. I don't believe in a state. I don't believe in solution. I don't believe in anything. I believe in economy, because economy, as I said, one day probably will pave the way towards peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We don't want conferences. We don't want somebody to stand up and to talk about two-state solution for two people. We want economy. If you will succeed to improve the Palestinian economy, I will be so thankful for all of you, and I will remember you forever, that you are the one who tried to help me to solve my conflict with the Israelis.
So, and someone asked that question, which is, what is stopping the Palestinians from becoming a self-sustaining economy? What is holding them back? We've seen what the Israelis are able to do in the exact same area.
I will never blame Israel right now. I should have to blame one thing, that the corruption of the Palestinian Authority is the one who caused damage to the Palestinian internal economy. Excuse me, since the arrival of the Palestinian Authority to the West Bank and Gaza in May 1994, what the Palestinian Authority did over there, I didn't see one clinic built by the Palestinian Authority. I didn't see one hospital built by the Palestinian Authority. I didn't see one university built by the Palestinian Authority since their arrival until now. And we are talking about 27 years, man, 27 years. So the corruption of the Palestinian Authority killed the Palestinian economy, but not Israel itself.
One of the questions is, how can we help prevent donations, both the aid that comes from America and others, from falling into the hands of groups like Hamas?
I don't think that this is something possible, because, you know, looks like to me that there are countries today in this world who are really trying to keep the conflict going on. And I believe that there are countries in this world who became a part of the conflict rather than a part of the solution. It's impossible. Yesterday, I was in a conference, in a meeting with WIZO people, and I said that if the American administration is going to renew its funding and its aid to the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Biden should have to condition this aid and this funding by saying to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that without allowing economic cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians, I am not going to send any money to the Palestinian Authority. I think that the Palestinian Authority trying to fight today against any economic cooperation between Palestinian businessmen and Israeli businessmen. I think that this is very, very simple to do it. I think that the Americans can do it. I think that the Europeans can do it. And that's probably will increase the Palestinian economy and will bring more and more prosperity to the Palestinian economy. But by giving the money and transferring the aid and coming to the American people at the end of the year by saying that we already contributed $2 billion to the Palestinians to invest in hospitals, to invest in universities, to invest in education. This is totally rubbish. That's never ever happened. I want to see President Biden standing up by saying any money will go to the Palestinian Authority should have to be conditioned. And the main important condition here, how we can create a cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians on the economic issue. Without that, I don't believe that we are going to move forward.
I think that is a beautiful spot for us to wrap this up. And I really appreciate both the insights, the solutions, the way we can help, everything you said tonight, Mr. Eid. It really is really powerful and really important to hear it from your perspective. So I also wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We'll be back again next week at the same time. Rabbi Kamras will be our facilitator and moderator then, and wishing everybody just you know, a good and healthy week, and stay healthy out there, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, and wishing you a very wonderful evening.